First Person Advisors is now a subsidiary of NFP, the fifth largest insurance broker in the world, combining local expertise with access to global capabilities and solutions. Learn more at firstpersonadvisors.com.
It is my privilege and honor as chairman of the Board of Trustees to introduce Pamela Whitten as the 19th president of Indiana University. Pamela.
I've always considered IU to be among the best public universities in the country. And so I am humbled and I am honored and I am excited to be joining IU.
History made at Indiana University. Pamela Whitten becomes the school's 19th president, the first woman to lead IU, already inspiring that next generation of Hoosier women.
We are so excited to have another great female leader to look up to.
We are so proud of you and can't wait to see what you accomplish here.
You're such an inspiration to future generations of women.
We're looking forward to your leadership here on campus.
An accomplished educator, researcher, and internationally recognized expert in telemedicine who finally landed her dream job. Get to know Indiana University President Pam Whitten on this edition of the Business and Beyond podcast. Hello and welcome to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. I'm Gary Deck. Pam Whitten grew up in the suburbs of Nashville, Tennessee, but she's always had her eye on Indiana. Her journey to get here took her through a number of states and roles at the University of Kansas, Michigan State University, and the University of Georgia. Most recently, she served as president of the second largest public university in Georgia, Kennesaw State, where she led the school to 2 straight years of record growth. And I am very pleased to be joined on the Business and Beyond podcast by IU President Pam Whitten. President Whitten, really appreciate you taking the time to join us.
My pleasure.
And you know, I was going to say you're not the new president anymore. You know, you've been on the job now for just over 6 months. Do you feel like you're settling into your role?
I do. You know, the way I describe it is that it feels like things are coming into focus.
Mm-hmm. You know, so many things, and I know probably like drinking out of a fire hose in many respects, but you had so many things going on, so many moving parts as you get into a role at a major university like IU. Has anything, and you've traveled around the state, certainly to all the campuses and met with many, many people. Has anything surprised you at all or been maybe not what you expected?
Yeah, I think the thing that has perhaps impressed me the most is just the significant footprint of Indiana University. When you're coming from outside the state of Indiana, you have a sense of what it is, but it really takes being on the ground and to reference your point, visiting on a pretty regular basis, all 5 of our regional campuses, and certainly IUPUI and Bloomington, and the fact that we have the biggest med school in the country with 9 campuses of its own. There's no part of the state of Indiana that we don't touch.
I want to talk about your visits around the state, but something that I thought about it, doing a little research and read a piece about this being your dream job, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on that and why this is a dream job for you. And that night before, because I read this, the night before you were introduced, I think, as president, you talk about not being able to sleep. Take us back to that. Kind of that night before you were introduced and kind of what your mindset was.
Well, I guess I would urge listeners to think about when they were kids, if they celebrated Christmas, that night before when you anticipated something pretty wonderful happening or starting the next day. And that's really what that feeling was like the night before I was announced. And then, the issue or what's so impressive or so important to remember in terms of IU is really understanding, as I referenced before, the breadth and scope. And so, what made this position really my dream job was the range of opportunity. I had spent many years, of course, in the Big Ten. So coming back to the Midwest was wonderful. It's really the space and the place where my husband and I feel the most comfortable in terms of values and approach to life and how people treat one another. Certainly the type of academic institution that we have in Bloomington. I started my academic career as a faculty member in an academic medical center back in Kansas, as you referenced. So the chance to come back and work with not only a wonderful and large med center, but one that was so committed to doing groundbreaking research. And then, of course, my latest gig at Kennesaw State and the opportunity to work at an urban institution and an appreciation for the potential and all that IUPUI can be. The culmination of that, along with our impact in regional parts of Indiana, really just made this a dream job, and it has not disappointed.
Yeah. Mitch, I want to talk about your time at Kennesaw State as well, especially that correlation to IUPUI, but you spent time here, significant time in the Big Ten at Michigan State. Has the Big Ten as I say a conference, and by that I mean the schools, the academic institutions, the research engines, has the Big Ten conference, the schools, has it changed at all since the time you were at Michigan State?
I think that there's no bias on my part, of course, but I think the Big Ten, when we speak of a conference, we can talk about sports in a separate point, but when we think about the combination of schools from an academic perspective, I think it is, frankly, the elite powerhouse conference in the United States. If you look at the institutions across the Big Ten, we are in large part really the research powerhouses, across the United States. The type of scholarship that is performed, the number of PhD students, the number of, undergraduates from all types of backgrounds that are able to launch their academic career at our institutions, the experience, the focus on diversity and equity now at our institutions, the whole picture, I think really sets the institutions apart that are in the Big Ten. And, I think that with that comes responsibility really for the rest of the country to really lead by example in terms of how exemplar academic institutions really should operate.
Yeah. You were a groundbreaker, certainly at IU, the first woman to lead the university. Something I know as you started your career in education, certainly your educational journey, probably weren't a lot of opportunities at that time for women in higher education. But now as you look at the Big Ten, you're at IU, and there are a number, I think there are 5 or 6 women leading Big Ten universities.
Yes. If you look at the new interim president of Michigan as a woman too, I think we're closing in on 50% or pretty close to 50% being females in the Big Ten. Of course, that just feels natural to us. That's right. That's how the world will work. And I will say my female colleagues, certainly as well as my male colleagues in the Big Ten, are all really outstanding leaders. Yeah.
You mentioned Kennesaw State is where you came from most immediately, and your time there leading that university, the second largest university, I believe, in the Georgia system, an urban university in Atlanta. And you mentioned it, and I was curious about it as well. Your time there, your experience there, and how does that correlate to how you view opportunities going forward at an institution like IUPUI, which is such an economic engine, certainly for Central Indiana and even more broadly, the state of Indiana?
It's funny. We have these experiences in life that we don't necessarily know are going to help prepare us for where we end up. And, I had been at, kind of more traditional schools, right? Kansas, Michigan State, Georgia, before going to Kennesaw State. And Kennesaw State really opened my eyes into, the type of campus, the type of opportunity that you have in an urban institution. And I'm so grateful for that experience. And, you really see it across multiple avenues. You see the opportunities for what you can accomplish in terms of a more diverse student body. The opportunity for really, expanding and changing lives, for example, with more first generation college students as well that attend your school that we often see in urban settings. It's an interesting time. More and more students, even traditional students, are looking at the opportunities available in an urban setting and choosing to go to college in that setting because of experiences and internships and lifestyle that they prefer in an urban setting. And so it's an interesting transition time. And of course, with that also comes the opportunity to really have an impact on your city and your region, from an economic perspective, from a quality of life perspective, from an impact on health and other aspects of life. And, that's where IUPUI, I think, has done amazing, wonderful things, but also still has a lot of runway to really build and expand upon that and reach the potential. And really, I would argue our responsibility to serve Indianapolis and beyond.
Yeah, could you expand on that? Because again, and I don't think it's an overstatement at all that the importance of IUPUI in particular on Indianapolis and the central Indiana region. But, over time, I think there has been, I know there's been, a level of competitiveness that maybe in some instances hasn't been necessarily positive between Bloomington and Indianapolis. You see runway, you see opportunity. How do you see that maybe taking shape in future years in terms of the role that IUPUI has in the state?
I've heard that reference before, the competitiveness between IUPUI and IU Bloomington. And I will confess that it confuses me. Both campuses, I would argue, are extraordinary. And of course, we're all part of Indiana University. And on my watch, those days are gone. We will celebrate each other's successes. And, each campus has the opportunity to rise and contribute in ways that only benefit students and people in the state and beyond. And so I think it's an exciting time to look at having the opportunity to support and celebrate one another as well. And so I think you'll be seeing, hopefully you'll be seeing a real attitude shift and change as we recognize that we all rise when we rise independently.
Yeah, you've made a point of saying collaboration is very important and will be very important during your time there at Indiana University. As you look to the north to Purdue University, and how fortunate we are in Indiana to have two great institutions like IU and Purdue, what do you see as collaboration opportunities or opportunities to work with Purdue? Two different universities, two different missions, but each very important. What do you see as those opportunities?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question. It has really been my pleasure, the opportunities I've had to, work with and correspond with Purdue, particularly with their president, Mitch Daniels. And we, as you referenced, are incredibly fortunate in the state of Indiana to have two, really such extraordinary universities in Indiana University and in Purdue. Now, before I go too far, I do want to remind everyone that we did enjoy the victory over Purdue not too long.
Very good.
And we'll continue to enjoy that. And there's a couple of days of the year when we will agree to disagree as institutions. But there's really a lot we can do together. And so we're already having discussions and some activity related to partnering and working together for, economic impact on the state, for, what the role that we can play to make sure that we are preparing students for the careers, not only today in the state of Indiana, but those that will be coming around in future days as well. President Daniels and I have also had conversations about having very mutual shared interest in not only recruiting talent to the state of Indiana to go to school at our institutions and talent within the state of Indiana to stay here and go to our institutions, but we also are like-minded in wanting to keep those people in the state of Indiana beyond their graduation as well. And so we have multiple conversations and things in the work to try to reach those goals together as well. So I'm grateful to have Purdue up the road, and again grateful to have them come visit Bloomington anytime when we can beat them in basketball.
Yeah. How about how would you describe your relationship with President Daniels? He's certainly been an innovator in his time in higher education. How would you describe your relationship with Mitch Daniels?
Well, President Daniels has really been warm and welcoming from day one. I mean, we literally had dinner together within my first months, really, if not first weeks as president of Indiana. So he has been very generous in offering any time, to provide counsel or even to discuss things that we're interested in terms of pursuing together for the state. So it's a very positive relationship, and I enjoy very much having him as a colleague.
Yeah. You've talked also about, and it's kind of a segue out of the IU-Purdue relationship, but you've talked a lot about, I think, lifting up the state of Indiana and how Indiana University can help lift up the state of Indiana. As you look at just generally speaking, what ways can IU play a role? Certainly over the years, there's been a lot of engagement around the state of Indiana from IU and in various communities. But as you look at opportunities, be it partnerships with the business community or individual communities, how do you see Indiana University playing a role, maybe even an enhanced role in economic development, community engagement around the state?
I think the key word you just said was enhanced role. I think there's been a lot of good work that's been done and certainly a lot of goodwill and good intention. I think this is the time for us to step up and be more comfortable asserting our availability to assist and perhaps even serve in a lead role occasionally as well. And so that certainly means in recruiting new industry to the state. We're very, very proud of the students that we put out who will be the current workforce. And we are very happy to spread that message as appropriate to recruit industry to the state of Indiana, both large and small. And that certainly can mean, big corporate partners that come in, but it can also mean, more regional activities as well. We want to be aggressive and helpful in places like Gary and, Kokomo and Richmond and other areas as well. So, both statewide as well as local and regional initiatives in that area. We're also interested in frankly, listening and helping and cooperating as well. We want employers and future employers to be communicating with us what they need or they think they need in future workers so that we can create those opportunities both in the classroom and experiences outside the classroom to make sure that students that are graduating with an IU degree are prepared to meet that need as well. So we recognize that we need to listen to.
Yes, certainly the impact of Indiana University, a major research institution, is research, and there have been record numbers set in that area at Indiana University. I know that's one of your focus areas as well. As you look at research, because it's such an economic engine for the state, whether it's Bloomington or Indianapolis related to IU, how do you see research playing, again, an enhanced role or an even greater role in the Indiana economy going forward? Are there opportunities? I mean, the research engine has been very powerful to date, but is there the opportunity to ramp that up?
There is absolutely the opportunity. And, if you look around at other states that have successfully launched, research cooperatives or concentrated, thematic research areas, those investments have paid off so well for those states. And we see that in Indiana, and we think there's an opportunity for more. And so, of course, one large example from Indiana University would be the research from our School of Medicine. And, we just announced that we had last year in 2021, we had the best funded research year ever, particularly from the National Institute of Health, which is the gold standard for research investment. And so we are, I think we're 27th in the country now, if I remember correctly. We're 14th in terms of public medical schools in the amount of research. And it is groundbreaking, life-changing research in Alzheimer's and cancer, pediatric areas as well. But with that also comes often the development of products and drugs and services that can translate into economic development for a region. And so we recognize that and really think it's important to invest even more heavily to have a significant impact on the medical and the biomedical economic infrastructure in the state of Indiana. So you'll be seeing more investment from us in that area.
Yeah. How about telemedicine? Because obviously that's an area of your expertise. You're recognized around the globe for your expertise in telemedicine. Does that hold opportunities specifically here in the state of Indiana? And I'm thinking also rural and smaller communities around the state.
It does. It does. And thank you for acknowledging that. About 1 million years ago, when I was a regular old college professor myself, my research area was in the field of telemedicine and specifically looking at access and, health and cost outcomes. And we did it for many years. And there was a lot of good work, but those of us in the research field, kind of look at that pandemic and go, wow, it only took a pandemic, right, for telemedicine to really become ubiquitous and there to be increased expectations. And it is definitely an opportunity for us to enhance access to health services. And that's important in Indiana. We have a lot of markers where, let's just say, we are not punching up to our weight in terms of the health status of our citizens. And so we need to look at all kinds of solutions, and certainly accessing healthcare services and monitoring through telemedicine will be one important tool for us to use.
Yeah. Okay. Before we go to a break, I know you're a big sports fan, right?
I am.
What's it been like, settling into the Big Ten again and rooting the basketball team? You mentioned the win over Purdue. You've had some other big wins on the guys' side, but what I want to ask you about, the lady Hoosiers have become a national power in basketball. That's a pretty exciting story.
It's a very exciting story. Our women's team, of course, is very well coached, as we know, but also we just have a powerhouse. And gosh, when we played Purdue recently, I think we had over 8,000 people attend that game. So people are showing up to support our women as they should. They play just fantastic basketball. I will say we had fun, just as an anecdote, when we had a little snow a little while ago. We had a game against Minnesota, and so because we had gone remote, the only folks that could show up were the teams basically to the game. But my husband and I found our way over there and literally got to watch a basketball game that felt like it was put on for the two of us as we sat on
Nice.
We had a nice win over Minnesota that night as well. And so it is a team to be reckoned with. And let's just say I'm looking very forward to the dance this spring, and my expectations that they'll do very well.
Very good. Well, listen, when we come back, we'll explore Pam Whitten's journey to the president's office at IU, where she grew up, where she's been, and why education as a career really didn't come into focus right away. That's when the Business and Beyond podcast continues.
First Person Advisors is now a subsidiary of National Financial Partners, the fifth largest insurance broker and consultant in the world. Develop your total reward strategies all in one place with the combination of First Person's local expertise and NFP's global resources and integrated solutions. Learn more at firstpersonadvisors.com.
Welcome back to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. My guest this week, Indiana University President Pam Whitten. And Pam, you've moved around a bit over your lifetime. Would you consider yourself, though, a Tennessean? You were born near Nashville, spent some time in Memphis. What did you consider yourself kind of a native Tennessean?
When people ask me where I'm from, I'm one of those people that doesn't have a good answer. So lived in the Midwest when I was a little kid, lived in Tennessee, as you referenced, until high school. And then my parents moved to New England. So I went to high school in New England and then turned around and went back down to New Orleans to go to college before the grand adventure began. So I'm just one of those people that when people ask me where I'm from, sometimes I just want to say, where would you like me to be from?
Great. Well, tell me, what was life like growing up in Tennessee? What was through your high school years? What was your young life like?
No, I was just a regular kid. I grew up in a lovely family. I was one of four children. I actually have a sister a year older and a twin brother, and so there were three of us packed pretty close together, very, very close. As well. I grew up, really in the 70s in that time period, went to college in the 80s. And so, before we had media the way we do. So when I did move from Tennessee to Rhode Island, I had a really thick Southern accent. And I can remember being a brand new freshman and walking around the halls of high school and the kids up north would say, "Oh, just talk, just say something." And I tell you that will make a 14-year-old lose her accent very quickly. Under that kind of pressure. So just kind of regular happy childhood.
Were you focused really on academics? You play sports, extracurriculars? What kind of occupied most of your time?
I'm not going to lie. I had a decent social life, particularly in high school. But I was a kid who focused a lot on academics and, was in what was at the time. This was life before AP courses and things like that. So I was in what was called the advanced track, which was just a glorified way of saying we took everything a year earlier.
Right.
Than the other kids.
Did you have do you remember back? Did you have a favorite teacher or a teacher who really made an impact on your life?
Oh my gosh! In high school, it was a teacher. I'm not even sure if I could remember say her name right. It was like Miss Kostakowski, but she was my biology teacher in the 9th grade.
Uh-huh.
And I just loved that class. It was, first exposure to kind of high school science. And it was just, I'd like to think that the material was so interesting. In hindsight, she was probably just an exceptional teacher that made the material so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned social media a minute ago. I'd be interested in your take on, for all the positives of social media, and there are some, there are a lot of negatives as well. The social media, how do you view social media in the purview of higher education? Does it make it more challenging today with, social media and the fact if something happens, it's immediately out there, whether good, bad, or indifferent? How do you view social media?
Well, I think I would say first and foremost, it exists. And so it doesn't do us much good to lament some of the challenges that it brings to us. I would say, in balance, the opportunities are tremendous, right? The opportunities to share different perspectives and share information in such a timely way. Certainly as we moved into a crisis like a pandemic, it was wonderful to have a means to reach people so quickly. I think the challenge that we all know we face with it is how often inaccurate information is not, maybe post isn't so much the word, but accepted, right? And people kind of are running with that before you can correct the situation, for them. And so, I would think in higher ed or any larger organization, that's one of the bigger challenges is just dealing with, misinformation or misassumptions because it just spreads so fast, as well. But again, I think it's important to also focus on the opportunities it brings to us to do a better job serving our students as well.
So you mentioned you grew up in Nashville area, Tennessee, moved to New England. How did you end up at Tulane for your undergrad work?
Again, I wish I had a really good answer. When I was 18 years old, I was really interested in getting as far away from home as I could.
Right.
I love my family. My parents were all very close, but I just wanted a great adventure. And I ended up at Tulane, and we'll just leave it at that. And it was a good event.
Good. Now, how about your interest in telemedicine? As I read that really developed when you were at Kansas, at the University of Kansas. And as I think I read somewhere, you basically kind of went knocking on doors, looking for opportunities to match your background, I think, in technology and medicine, and wound up at the telemedicine doorstep.
That's really a true story. And, I try to share that with students as much as I can to kind of talk about how we can accidentally make amazing opportunities for ourselves. And so when I was a PhD student at the University of Kansas, I was interested in both healthcare and technology. And you have to remember, this was well before anything that we have now. We weren't even regularly using email at the time. I'll put them there. But I was interested in the two. And so I went 30 miles up the road to KU Medical Center and literally knocked on doors and said, "Hi, I'm Pam Whitten. I'm a new PhD student. I'm interested in healthcare and technology. Is there anything interesting going on?" And after, I would say, 4 or 5 knocks, I found this thing called telemedicine. There were only 4 programs in the country at the time. And I persuaded the medical school to fund me that summer to basically fly around the state and study it and learn about it and find out why it wasn't really being used that much. And then came back with ideas and recommendations. And from that, basically came a research agenda. And so knock on a few doors. Sometimes that'll bring you to some great places.
Yeah. And telemedicine certainly has come of age for a number of reasons. And certainly the pandemic, I think, has accelerated its acceptance. How do you view telemedicine as an important tool in our everyday life?
I think we've moved past questioning a lot of things we can do via technology because of the convenience that it offers, right? And so, my early years of telemedicine, we did a lot of studies just to look at the quote efficacy, and that's just a fancy way of saying that you're making sure it's doing what it's supposed to do, that you can diagnose the right thing, right? And found pretty quickly in almost all disciplines, it's efficacious. It does what it needs to do clinically. And so there's still a desire, certainly, for in-person activity. We all see that in many parts of life, the opportunity to build relationships, et cetera. But when push comes to shove and you live in an area for example, a rural area where there is no pediatric psychiatrist for 200 miles. Mm-hmm. If you're going to bring those services to your young folks, you're going to need an alternative like telemedicine. And so, I think we've all recognized that access matters, and we want to bring care to people where they are, so that they are actually able to either identify something and correct it or maintain their health as well.
Yeah. So your path, I should mention too, your path to education or career in education, it really didn't start immediately, right? The education piece. You had some private sector experience. Talk about that time between getting out of your educational pursuits and getting into administration.
Yeah, so I graduated from college. I graduated from Tulane, and I actually got married a week later at age 21. Still married to the same guy. Do the math, you'll figure out it's been a really long time. Moved to Kentucky and got a master's degree, and then had about 7 or 8 years where I did work. And so I had 2 of my 3 kids during that time period, and had a couple of interesting jobs. I was in charge of corporate communications for the bank in Europe that ran banking on military installations, and then came back and did some professional communication work in the healthcare industry. And then just kind of turned to my husband and said, I'd really like to go get a PhD and be a college professor. And he's really this great guy. And he said, okay. And so, you go to the school that has people and the things you want to study. So we moved to Lawrence, Kansas, so I could pursue a PhD at that point. And then as you heard earlier, the rest is kind of history in terms of finding my research focus, et cetera.
Yeah. The Atlanta Business Chronicle named you in 2020 among the most admired CEOs. They're in the Atlanta area, which I think by any description, a university president is a CEO. As you look at the qualities, the most important qualities you see in a leader, what would you identify as those most important qualities?
I would answer that question the same and differently than I would have 10 years ago. Of course, you learn as you have experience as a leader. And 10 years ago, I would still talk about the need to have integrity, great integrity in this position. There is nothing that I would sell my soul for, in terms of this job. And so always doing the right thing, courage of your convictions, being willing and understanding that you have to make decisions that not everyone is going to like. And of course, that is exacerbated by social media that we talked about a few minutes ago. But all of that, I think, is very, very important in leadership today. But I would also add that over the last 10 years, how significant it is to understand multiple perspectives, to have empathy for others as you move forward, and really what a gift it is to figure out how to listen well. How much wiser you're going to be, not only in your decisions, but the implementation of those decisions, if you're able to really, really hear what people are telling you.
I also read Churchill is he your most admired leader? And if so, why?
I think Churchill is fascinating for so many reasons. If you've read much about him, you come to understand that he certainly had ups and downs and some very significant challenges and some real low points. And yet he was really a leader for his time. Ultimately, when he did come out and eventually became prime minister and led through one of the greatest challenges in history, through the Second World War, those things that had been challenging for him in other leadership contexts were exactly the things that Great Britain needed during that time, to propel them, that strength, the rhetorical and communication skills that he had, his willingness to make decisions and stick with very hard things, ultimately ended up making him a great leader. And I think that's just a fascinating study of leadership to understand the different spaces and places that lead to, most effective leadership.
Yeah. As we wrap up, as you look out to the next year plus, lots of opportunities, challenges as well. How would you kind of encapsulate what you'd like to accomplish here, what you see as opportunities in the next, in the coming year, 2022 and into the next year?
I think this is an incredibly exciting time for Indiana University for multiple reasons. Part of what I am doing in my first year is really building a senior leadership team. I inherited a cabinet that was majority had retired and moved on. And so I'm hiring 10 cabinet positions in about an 8-month period. And frankly, we are either promoting or bringing in rock stars. And so we are going to have some just phenomenal leadership, which will complement so well what is already extraordinary here in terms of a faculty base that does amazing work and students that I would argue really are the best in the world. So it's a great time. And so we'll be transitioning now to thinking more strategically, both about very pragmatic issues that hopefully will have a positive impact on our students, but also dreaming big about the vision that we have and how we're going to get there as an institution that will really hopefully transform the experience not only for our students, but also help our faculty to be successful. And then, as of course we said earlier, to really benefit the state of Indiana as a whole as well. It's a good time to be a part of Indiana University.
Yeah, very good. Hey, very quickly, because you mentioned students, I'm remiss in not bringing that up. You have been very vocal about wanting to focus on students and talking about students should be the focus of everything you do there. And I think you mentioned these cabinet positions. I think I read where one of the positions will deal with students in connection to the university. Talk about just briefly, if you would, that focus on students and why you feel it is so important.
So students are the center of the University, Indiana University, full stop. They really are. Every decision we make, we stop and contemplate how will this positively impact a student. That is who we are at Indiana University. And you have done your homework. And one of the things that was interesting to me when I came here was to realize there was a cabinet that did not have a senior level leader whose focus was purely on students. We did not have a vice president of student affairs or student success on our cabinet. That is changing. We're doing a national search right now with finalists to be on campus in April, and we will have a vice president of student success who will be there to interject students in every conversation that we have.
Very good. Pam Whitten, the 19th president at Indiana University, first female president to lead the university. Pam, a real treat to have you on the podcast. And thanks for all you do, not only for IU, but for the state of Indiana. Look forward to having you on the show again sometime soon.
Many thanks to you. Go IU.
All right. And thank you for joining us on this edition of the Business and Beyond podcast. It is a weekly conversation with achievers in business, sports, entertainment, and beyond. And you can download all of our past episodes by going to InsideIndianaBusiness.com and click on the subscribe tab. I'm Gary Dick. We'll see you next time.